Welcome to the presentation video of our merchant testing and training card pack. This product is a set of 8 EMV test cards that can be used with payment terminals and with ATMs. They are production grade cards, the very same cards that are used by banks and issuers all around the world, encoded with test profiles that allow testing for positive and negative behavior. The cards are intended to be used for payment terminal testing to ensure that they support certain brands or certain features. They are not, however, intended for certification or full-blown test and validation, because those are prerequisites for terminals to be in service and need very specific and specialized equipment. In terms of terminal behavior, our cards are more intended to ensure that the terminal has been set up correctly and is not damaged. The cards can be used to test the terminal's connection with the acquirer or the service provider, and that the transactions go to the right payment processor. Another important aspect is staff training. This could be for your technical staff developing, testing, or supporting your terminals, but also for your customer-facing staff who have to operate terminals to process transactions and need to be ready for every situation. This set of cards is intended for a large audience in the payment space. It can be used by small merchants who have been provided with a terminal by a payment processor and want to test the connectivity and train themselves on the device. It can be used by medium to large merchants who operate their own terminal estate and management system and need to ensure that rollouts are successful, that connectivity is fully functional, and that their staff know how to operate the terminals. It can be used by terminal providers to test configurations before sending them out. It can also be used by payment service providers and value-added resellers for all the purposes stated previously. And it can be used by acquirers for all that, plus testing routing on the switch. The pack contains 5 fully functional cards, which can be used to test and train for positive behavior, as well as 3 cards with common problems that most stores should expect to see probably more than once a week. The cards can be used as MagStripe, simply by swiping them, but they are really intended to be used for chip and pin transactions, or for contactless transactions. The profiles loaded on the cards are globally interoperable, which is really what EMV is for. The cards come with a country of origin and a currency, but those are mostly transparent pieces of information for a payment terminal, because terminals are programmed, tested, and certified for global acceptance. The pack contains a Visa credit card, which is both contact and contactless, a very common type of card, denominated in US dollar. It contains a MasterCard credit card, also both contact and contactless, also very common, denominated in euro. It contains a Diners Club card, contact and contactless, in US dollar. If you're based in the US and are looking to test for Discover, just know that Diners and Discover are actually the same brand, share the same technology, and that Diners and Discover are interchangeable in terms of testing. The pack contains a Visa Electron card, denominated in US dollar and contact only, so no tap. And the last functioning card is a Maestro debit card, contact and contactless, in euro. Now for the cards with the common issues. The first one is a card that is expired, very common in the real world. This allows you to test the behavior of the terminal when such a card is inserted, and to train your staff on how to react when this happens. The next one is a card with a payment application that is blocked. This typically happens when the card was expired but the cardholder tried to use it anyway, or when a card has been reported stolen, or for any number of reasons why a bank would want that the card not be used anymore. Again, you can test the terminal behavior and train your staff on this. And finally, a card with a blocked PIN, which typically happens when too many wrong pins have been presented. All those cards should be a good representation of the types of cards that a store normally sees on a weekly basis. Those are all test cards and are not intended to be used on the live terminal. Only live cards should be used on the live terminal or ATM. In order to use the cards from our pack, you need to put your terminal in test mode, which is a very common thing to do. There are differences between live and test in terms of terminal keys. Live cards are protected with live keys from the card brands like Visa and MasterCard. Therefore, live terminals are loaded with live keys so that live cards can be accepted. Test cards, on the other hand, are protected with test keys, also coming from the card brands, and that have been created for the purpose of testing. Therefore, terminals in test mode are loaded with test keys so that test cards can be accepted. That's one difference between live and test, and it does not impact the terminal behavior in any other way. The second difference is in terms of where the transaction goes. A live transaction typically goes to an acquirer, whose job it is to forward it to the payment network that the card belongs to. So, for instance, if you use a Visa card, the acquirer sends the transaction to Visa. And then Visa would find your bank and forward the transaction to them, so that your bank can approve the transaction that was created with your card. And this approval makes its way all the way back to the terminal and to your card. In test mode, because the test cards do not have an issuing bank, the acquirer uses a simulator in place of the payment network in the issuing bank. This is a very standard practice. What this means is that for the cards to work, they simply need to be loaded on the simulator. The document that comes with our card pack contains all the information that are needed to do this. But we use fairly standard test profiles, so there is a good chance that those cards are already loaded. If there is an issue, simply send our document to the provider of your terminal or to your acquirer. Loading the test configuration is typically a simple procedure, but it is a proprietary operation, which means that there is no unique way of doing it. For some terminals, it's simply the press of a button on the acquirer or the payment processor's management system, which generates a download onto the device and is ready to test. On some devices, you need to plug a USB key that contains the configuration. And on other devices, it's a simple menu entry. You should contact your terminal provider if you do not know how to load a test configuration. We also provide a tool to reset the cards, free of charge. Although our cards have been specially crafted to not have issues with offline counters, depending on your terminal configuration, those might still sometimes stop the cards from accepting more transactions. In the real world, the issuer resets the card every time the chip is used. But some simulators do not have this feature, which can cause issues with test cards. This is especially true when it comes to using the contactless interface. Similarly, if you present the wrong PIN too many times to a card, the PIN will be blocked, which in the real world can be unblocked by using the card at an ATM. But again, not all simulators support this unblocking feature. So that you can make the most of those cards, we have developed a Python script that simply simulates a full online transaction for all the cards included in our pack, and that clears those counters and unblocks the PIN. You can download the script free of charge, and there is a video that explains how to use it and how to install it. All it needs is a computer and a USB smart card reader. Let's have a quick look at how our cards work, starting with a contact chip and PIN transaction. Let's say that we have a terminal, very standard, already loaded with a test configuration, and that we're choosing to make a sale for $9.78. The terminal is asking for a card to be inserted, at which point we are inserting our test Visa credit card. The terminal reads the card data, sees that a PIN should be entered, and prompts the cardholder to enter it. Then the transaction continues on, goes online for authorization, and is approved. Then the cardholder is prompted to remove the card, which we do, and the transaction is finished. And that will have proof that the terminal can accept Visa transactions and that the connection to the acquirer is working. And this can also be used to train staff on how to operate the terminal to make a sale. Let's now have a look at contactless transactions. Same as before, we have a terminal already in test mode, and we are choosing to make a sale for $12.50. Because the terminal supports contactless transactions, the cardholder is prompted to either wave or tap the card, or to insert it for a chip transaction. As the customer taps the card, the transaction is processed, might go online for authorization, and is approved, so the cardholder can take the card away from the terminal. And this will have proved that the terminal can process Visa contactless transactions, and you can train your staff on how to run such transactions, but also to see what happens if the card is removed too early, or if the card is not positioned correctly on the terminal. And you can do the same thing with other card brands, provided that your terminal supports them. Let's now have a look at testing and training for negative behavior. We can start with the expired card. Same as before, we have a terminal in test mode. And here we are choosing to make a sale for $8.35. The cardholder is prompted to insert the card, which we do. The terminal reads the card data and realizes that the card is actually expired, which causes the transaction to fail, and for the cardholder to be prompted to remove the card. So you can test your terminal's actual behavior when faced with a card like that. See what's displayed on the screen and what's printed on the receipt. And you can train your staff to inform customers on what happened and why the transaction was declined. Let's have a quick look at what happens with our card that has a blocked application. Again, same terminal. Choosing to make a sale for $37.25. The card is being inserted. The terminal reads the card data. And because the MasterCard application that was loaded on that card has been blocked, the terminal doesn't have any payment applications to run a transaction on, and is informing the cardholder. So, same as before, you can see what your terminal actually displays in this situation, and you can train your staff to react accordingly. As a last example, let's have a look at what happens with the card where the PIN is blocked. Obviously, if the terminal you use does not support PIN input, or does not support offline PIN presentation, then the behavior will be entirely different. This is especially true if you present this card at an ATM, where the PIN is always verified online by the issuer and the PIN on the card is just being ignored. Typical setup, same terminal. Choosing to run a transaction for $13.99. The card is being inserted. It's being read. And the terminal realizes that it should prompt for PIN presentation, but that the PIN tries have been exceeded in a previous transaction, which causes the transaction to fail. And as before, you can see what your own terminal actually displays in such a situation, and you can train your staff on how to react to this. Thank you for watching this video. We hope that it answered all your questions. And if not, do not hesitate to send us an email.